the most advanced recruiting techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with Rick Girard.
It is very possible to share the same core values, yet differ in religious or political views. This we must understand when hiring new people. Now, you might be thinking something like, we already have a very harmonious team, and we don't want someone who's bringing their strong political, religious, or social agenda into our environment. Then build the practice into your corporate values and let it blossom throughout the company. After all, we are servants to the business, and what is good for the business is innovation, diversity, and growth, all of which are fueled by proper value alignment. I'm Rick Girard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. We help entrepreneurs and executives win the strongest hires. We do so by sharing insights from top-performing rebel entrepreneurs, game changers, and industry leaders like our guest today, Bianca Larger. She is the president of Social Intelligence Corporation. By driving the vision of social intelligence to provide productive, ethical, and innovative solutions, she has spent her time working closely with Fortune 500 companies and nonprofits alike to create safe and discrimination-free workplaces. Bianca obtained her MBA from Pepperdine University with a concentration on dispute resolution and is a LinkedIn learning instructor. She is an expert in consumer reporting focused on online risk for human resources, which is what makes Bianca the perfect expert for today's topic. Bianca, welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show.
Hi, Rick. Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you.
Yeah.
So today we're going to discuss valid reasons not to hire or to hire based on a person's social profile. We're going to talk about the pitfalls of that whole thing, which can be a mess, right? And then we're going to talk about how to properly use social media background check to limit your company liability. Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan. Let's do it.
All right. So what are the challenges with conducting a social media check? Like why is it bad for me to just, I do this all the time, by the way. I'll talk to somebody. I'll go, okay, let's check out them on Facebook.
Of course. Yeah, no, I mean, here we are all day, keyboards in our hand, Facebook at the ready. And that's the way it goes sometimes. At the very least, pulling up their LinkedIn, taking out their history, and that's also some of the purposes of social networking and social media profiles is to connect with people and to see a little bit of who they are. And I think it's very natural. It's the whole point of that is, can I trust this person? Is this someone that I'm going to be able to trust and see? The problem arises when you're doing that for the purpose of hiring somebody. And there's several reasons why it's problematic, but the biggest overarching theme there is a bias that it can create without you even necessarily meaning to do so. You can't help it. You find out a whole lot of information by pulling up somebody's profile sometimes. And we all have our own thoughts, value systems, belief systems. And we just can't help but judge folks. And sometimes it's for the wrong reasons. And that opens up a whole can of worms because there's actually potentially legal consequences there. There's certainly potentially business outcomes that you either miss or, you absolutely avoid or disrupt completely by doing that. So
when you manage it creates bias, right? But how does it really create bias? If you're looking at somebody's pictures and maybe reading some of their posts, doesn't that kind of give you an idea of the truth of who they are?
Sometimes I think it's sometimes also we start to create narratives in our head about who this person is. And
so if you see those party pictures for Cancun,
sure.
An idea that somebody,
Yeah, I mean, it could be as innocuous as that, right? And not only that, but incredibly inefficient. Rick, I think you have better things to do with your time than to scroll through somebody's Cancun pictures, however entertaining that might be sometimes. But truly, I mean, that's kind of a part of the equation here too. Not only can you have this bias and not necessarily what criteria are you using? Are you looking at the right, Rick? Are you just going down the rabbit hole and kind of taking a look at vacation photos? What is it? What set of circumstances are you actually applying? And are you doing that consistently across the board that reflects your organization's values, the outcomes that you want to drive? If you're just kind of willy-nilly taking a look, again, there's that narrative that you're creating, and you're potentially just wasting a bunch of time.
Yeah, I would imagine there's a lot of assumptions that are being made as you're looking at these things too. I mean, it's not going to help you really gain clarity, other than probably if you go deeper in on some of the content, you find some things that are potentially threatening to the company.
Exactly. Well, and that's a little bit of the point too, right? And that's why we kind of can't help ourselves to kind of play detective or kind of be like, oh, let me just see what this person's really up to. And that's fine, but what criteria are you really considering? What is problematic and what isn't? What is the line that you draw, in terms of hate speech? It's a very complex and complicated situation now more than ever. I think we all are very unclear almost as to what is, what isn't, and all this kind of stuff. And so how do you even know what you know? And I got to say, like, this is sort of way getting into it, but when we look at hate speech or hate groups, we actually look at resources or sources that people have defined these things. And so some of this stuff it's not what it appears to be. So you could also just be missing stuff that you wouldn't even know that folks are participating in. And it's just complicated. It's really complicated. Each platform is complicated.
Well, I think it's important to note that if you have a strong interview process, right?
Yeah.
And you've gotten somebody to the point where you're doing, you're considering hiring them, and you're starting to say, well, we should check out their social profiles, check references, do that sort of thing.
Sure.
Right. If you've got a strong interview process, you're probably not going to find any surprises. But if you don't, that's, you've been making assumptions all through the process up until that point anyway.
Yeah. And most of the time that is, an offer, pre-offer, right around offer is about the time where you are doing those kind of final, criminal background checks, which sometimes you even feel like are just like dotting the I's and crossing the T's, right? And every now and then there is something that comes out. I mean, generally speaking, in most industries, hit rates are fairly low for criminal reports, which a hit rate means, when somebody has a criminal history. So it more often than not, those things are going to be in the clear. There's not going to be a necessarily a risk factor that you need to consider further. And this, it tracks with social media as well. So, it also like begs the question that, are you just wasting your time then by trying to create a narrative that may or may not be true? And if there is something that is problematic, do you have a formalized process really to figure out what those things are and track that and then act accordingly? And of course, in a legally defensible manner, which is a whole.
So then essentially, if you have that urge where you want to check somebody's social profile, you're better off to actually outsource that to somebody who does that professionally.
Yeah, I would say that you really want to think about how to formalize that process period, right? If you are going to take on that life,
startups don't formalize any process.
Not at all.
Growing, right? Yeah. So this is always the challenge that I have with a lot of people that I know, is that they're going so hard. It's easier for them to just look at look at all their social profiles, then to say, okay, Bianca, I have somebody I'm thinking about hiring. Can you do a check on this for me?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, as entrepreneurs, as small business, folks, you're just trying to get through a lot of tasks a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so to me, that just begs the question even more that, like, why are you sitting there trying to Google somebody? First of all, you're at best going to spend 5-10 minutes, or if you assign somebody else to do it, are they even going to look at it at the same lens that you would be? It's just inefficient. It's just not something that much about. It's not something you should be wasting your time on, basically.
100%. So what are the problems with you doing that though? Like how can that hurt your company?
Well, and so there is protected class information that's on social media, right? So, I mean, there is a potentially legal issue that you might get yourself into. And this happens in small business all the time, right? Like kind of doing things willy-nilly and you don't even know that you're breaking the rules by breaking the rules and stuff. People can let things slip really easily like that. I have heard this many, many times when folks come to us to say people found out that I was Googling and, it kind of caused panic. Or in the other end of it, people, clients will come to us and say, my marketing guy saw something that my sales guy posted, and now I have like an internal war over here because something he posted has caused a problem in the workplace. So, when you're trying to kind of put out this fire on your own, or you're trying, first of all, you have other problems to deal with and stuff. And when you're trying to deal with it on your own, there really isn't a methodology there. There really isn't something that you can fall in line with. And, look, nobody wants to get sued, right? Nobody needs a lawsuit to deal with, and nobody needs nonsense to deal with unnecessarily. So, outside of wasting your time kind of doing it yourself, are you missing stuff? Is it stuff that you might not see that is going to cause a problem later? You're not really doing it as thoroughly as you should. And beyond that, you're bringing your own biases onto this. So even if you do make like a gut decision, which like that's what we do all day long, you one could be missing out on great talent. Or number two, you might actually be discriminating against somebody, and for reasons that just aren't really business related whatsoever. They're at worst illegal for you not to hire somebody, and at best just not a really good set of circumstances that your criteria that you're using to whether somebody's a fit for your organization or a fit for the role.
So the unintended consequences are that it is really potentially disruptive to the business.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. If you do yourself, DIY is not a good option.
No, I mean, even just from your day-to-day work, it's disruptive, right? Like, it's just like,
Exactly.
Get this off your list. Like, this is just not something you need to deal with.
Don't even put it on your list. I love that. I love that. All right, you're listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. I'm your host, Rick Girard. And for our podcast listeners, we're going to take a quick educational moment from our sponsors. Hey, check out stridesearch.com. There you'll find additional content and resources to help you land great hires. Our guest today is Bianca Lager. She is the president of Social Intelligence Corp. I pronounced your last name right?
Yeah, it's just like the beer, Lager.
Okay, cool. That's what I thought.
No need to church it up.
I had a little doubt that crept into my head as we were talking.
It looks fancier than it appears, but it's the beer.
Very cool. All right, and we're talking about actually social profiles and running them before you make a hire. So, all right, so let's talk about implementing a proper social media check, right? Yeah. So the best way to do it, as we've probably established, is to reach out to a professional like yourself. Is it super costly for a startup to have you run a check on somebody?
No, I mean, some of these checks run for as low as $10, each. So
$10.
$10, right? And so you're like, again, back to our conversation of like, don't put this on your list. For $10, like, what's it to you, right? It crosses the things that you need in terms of business related material, but also is very digestible, and isn't going to create legal issues for you or anything like that.
Yeah, and if you run a full background check on somebody, like you get that peace of mind, right? And you cover everything, right?
Yeah, and I mean
that's probably under $100.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all in terms of your other types of background checks. Yeah, I mean, generally even less than 50 with whatever it is that you're doing, but it depends on what the role is, who the person, all this kind of stuff. But I think that the idea obviously the point that we're making is there is vetting that needs to happen, right? Even if you have a million conversations with somebody and you feel really good about it. I mean, we've had, like we said, we worked with Fortune 100 companies and some of their top executives who you would think would be vetted through many lenses, have still, that old tweet.
No, but a lot of people don't vet. They don't, like most people don't pick references either. And, and there's a reason for it. And I think it's because most of the references are provided by the employee. They've already been pre-selected. And so, you know, the thought is that those people are just going to give good review anyway because they know the person or they're friends with them.
Yeah, and talk about a time waster, right? Like as you know, somebody running an entrepreneurial environment, who has time for that? And not only that, but you trust yourself and your own instincts quite a bit, right? And so you think you want to get a feel for it. And so that's again, you know, the idea behind looking at somebody's social media. It's the only data source too. I mean, talking about other background checks, it's the only data source that does give you that kind of behavioral insight that's real time. You know, this is of right now, today, the moment in time that we're looking at this person's online footprint. And it's not just social media. I mean, when we talk about like social media, sure, you're going to pull up somebody's Facebook, but we find stuff like really, what is the polite way to say this? I guess, do I have to be polite? Well, there's all sorts of very intense porn that we find on Amazon wish lists, for example, that people don't realize that they're sharing publicly. And it's not the soft stuff, folks, you know? And things like,
so that's something you can't unsee if you're an entrepreneur. You don't actually need to see that, do you? I mean,
well, I mean, you also want to talk about a harmonious work culture, right? Like, what if your other employee finds that, or your client, are they a client facing person and your client Googles them or something? It's just like, oh my gosh, like damage control, you know? So it's a lot about getting ahead of some of that stuff, or at the very least talking to the person that you're hiring and saying, yo, you know, this isn't a great look. And we do have a set of conduct that we want to uphold. So could you take it down at the very least?
Got it. All right. So walk me through the steps that you need to roll into your company that would kind of set up policy for this.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, obviously, seek legal counsel. You know, that's always a good idea to ensure that you're doing things the right way. And my legal counsel would behoove them if I didn't give the legal disclaimer that I cannot give legal advice, as the lawyers do and say. But yeah, I mean, first and foremost, you want to understand, like, you know, what is okay and what's not okay. Do you even have like a code of conduct? Do you have any kind of employee handbooks or any kind of basic conduct that is acceptable in the workplace? Most of the stuff is templated stuff. You can find it if you haven't even gone there.
Take a template and then build it out for your for your company environment to where it fits your business. And
it's basic stuff.
It doesn't take that long.
No.
I have this argument all the time. You know, I can't take a day to do this. Yeah, you can, because it's only going to benefit you.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, some of these things are really kind of business 101 too. I mean, if you hire employees, period, you do need to have some standards for legal purposes in terms of a safe workplace, a productive workplace, and all things like that. Especially if you live in the People's Republic of California, like you and I both do, Rick. There is, it's a very employee-friendly state. And so you have to be aware of your jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of your employees. We all are remote a lot of the time. You have to understand the laws that apply to them in their area. Most of the time, we have HR platforms and stuff that make it easy for us. So most of the stuff is housed or can be found within that. So in terms of social media, it's really just about making sure that you think about how social media applies to that. I would say, especially if you're a company that, all of us have clients, right? All of us are selling something. And so you do want to kind of have that extra care and thought towards a publicity and sort of a public nightmare, and make sure that you're putting out policies within your organization that are going to represent your company well. And that's all that people are really wanting. And when I say that, this isn't like only say good stuff about the company. This is like, don't say racist stuff. Don't be violent. Don't commit crimes. And don't post sexually explicit stuff, right? It can be like a 2 to 3 sentence, like this isn't okay here kind of a thing.
Yeah. All right. So we're creating a policy. That's the first step, right?
Yeah.
So what we're looking at is, what you can and cannot do, what is actionable, and what mitigates the risk for the company, right?
Yeah.
And again, hey, you can spend a day doing it now, or you can spend like 5 to 10 days later in court defending yourself at some point later on down the road.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I mean, it's and truly some of this stuff doesn't necessarily even take that long. Look, and here I am. This is our company and what we do every day. So a lot of this stuff can be supplied by a vendor. You call them up and you say, "What do I do?" And they're like, "Okay, let me walk you through it." Here's a template of this. Here's that. Sign up here, and you can get started within a couple hours. I mean, this isn't something that isn't necessarily you have to reinvent the wheel, or you have to have several meetings about, or you have to clear out of your calendar to think about it for 4 hours. It really can be sort of copy and pasted, sign up, get going, pay the $10 and you're off to the races.
Okay. So the first step is create a policy. What's second?
Yeah. I think the second one is just it's the legal requirements, right? So this is a background check. If you're doing other background checks, it should happen about at the same time. So operationally kind of figure out who's going to order the background check. How does that work? Get yourself set up like technically, I guess, with the platform that you're going to use. Make sure that if it's yourself or a staff member, they know what they're doing and what's required. Disclosures and authorizations in any background check are required. So generally they're the same as other kind of background checks. So you just have to kind of get those ducks in a row and just make sure that you have those things organized.
And then in that background check, what is it that you're actually vetting? Like, what do you plan to provide back that, again, I'm sure you ignore the pictures in Cancun, but like, what are the things that flag?
Yeah. So our company and our approach, the approach that social intelligence takes is an potentially adverse content approach. So we are looking to see if there is business related, potentially adverse content. Okay. And that's a very wordy way to say kind of risky stuff online, right? And the 4 main and universal categories that we look at for most clients are intolerant. So racism, hate speech, sexism, everything in that large bucket.
Does that include trolling?
It can, if it has intolerant nature. Trolling could also fall under a second category, which is potentially violent. So, you have things that are sort of harassing and actually threatening towards another individual that can definitely start reaching into that category. Another category is potentially illegal. So those break down into several subsections. Mostly, if you think about social media and the way people behave, like psychologically online, it's bragging about stealing stuff. It's bragging about doing drugs. Those are sort of the main things. I
love those videos of people who post themselves doing stuff like that. And then they get caught and they're like, wonder how that happened.
Yeah. Or at work, people will post themselves doing it at work and they think it's hilarious. Or and memes and things that are like, here's one of the things in our one of our favorite, we have a hall of shame, like a wall of shame of some of the good, the funny ones we got. One of my favorite is Kermit doing a little blow. And he's talking about like how pre-workout doesn't work for him anymore. And it's like a meme or whatever, but it's like, like it's just,
was that something that's flagged?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
Is it really?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, it is,
until it's legal.
Well, sure. But also, it isn't necessarily a death sentence for your job though. Right. And so here's a really good point. Like, what are we looking for when we look at these large buckets of information? I should add sexually explicit in there, but to talk about the drugs thing, this is the kind of stuff that an employer, it can create problems in the workplace. If this person actually does, have, I don't know, a drug problem or something that has anything to do with issues like that. At the end of the day, employers are asking to see this information because they need to do some some damage control ahead of time. Sometimes it is innocuous and it's kind of a funny meme like that, and if it's kind of just like a one-off meme, they're just like, can you just take that down? Like, come on, that's kind of in poor taste, you know?
Yeah, but that's okay. So I find that kind of funny. I thought it was
Yeah.
funny, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, in context, this is my problem with kind of where the world is going as far as
Yeah.
like censorship and humor, right? It's
Yeah.
subjective, and now it could be called out every time, and you know,
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
but
because
if you got
listen,
like 10 of those memes up,
right. I mean, because listen, you party on, you're not going to go to jail, but you can't
Yeah.
work here. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can't be work here and also have that publicly available to where our clients can kind of see that and maybe sending out the wrong message about who we are as a company or who we hire or what kind of workplace culture that we have. And it's not universal across so that Kermit the Frog example is a really good example of one company might be a hard no for them. And another company might be like, that's harmless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there definitely is a sense of like, who are you guys? What's your tolerant level here? What's, what think about this? But to your point, yeah, sure. I mean, post it all day long, but you might not be able to work here.
All right. So create a policy. Third party solution is kind of like the next piece. And then what documentation? So what kind of documentation?
Definitely. Well, so the policy already goes into that. And again, when you're reaching out to a provider and having a third party solution, this is going to be automatically documented for you, right? So part of doing the report and the candidate data and the report being completed, that is being all documented and well organized. So when you get a report back, you want to have a nice system of deciding whether Kermit matters or not. So again, most of the time, a provider can help you figure out how to do that. We have a short training program, it takes an hour, and we have 3 different assessment models that you can help kind of figure out if Kermit matters to your organization or not. What kind of action you can take based off that, and make it consistent across your board. So those are the types of things you want to document and just make sure. But again, this is actually fairly simple stuff that, again, can be done in like an afternoon or so, just to say, all right, what are we going to do this report then? Judy, are you going to look at it? What are you going to do next after you see this report, and just sort of lay out what that process looks like.
And I think it's really important to note that you really need to tie these to your core values of your organization, because if you don't, if they aren't who you are, then you're going to get yourself into trouble as well.
And a lot of times, actually, when we go through the training, to your point, that's what surfaces, especially for a lot of organizations that haven't documented their core values or really even done the exercise to think about what they are. They are starting to ask themselves, what would our clients think about this content? What would other employees think about this? And it helps them sort of form those set of values or identity if you haven't done that already.
Got it. All right. Shoot, we're getting pretty close on time. What would be 2 or 3 key takeaways you can give the audience that can plug into the business today?
Yeah, I mean, certainly formalize your approach here. And again, for $10, get it off your list. Take it off your list. Don't even put it on your list. Do something else to think about it. When you're thinking about social media in general, creating a 2 to 3 sentence policy that is something that you're going to decide, to have a basic set of conduct on social media that is acceptable to you or not. And the formula that we always talk about quite a bit is consistency plus documentation plus policy equals actionable. So you have those things lined up. You can take action. You can feel like you are in a legally defensible position, and you're not wasting your time or your team's time doing inefficient stuff.
Bianca, thanks so much for your time investment today. And I want to welcome you to the Higher Power Radio community. Now, what would be the best way in which members of our audience can find you, your company, find out a little bit more about you, and maybe engage in your services?
Yeah, absolutely. So socialintel.com, just hit us up on the contact page. Let us know that you came from the Higher Power podcast listening world here, and we'll definitely hook you up with that $10 pricing moving forward. So thanks for everybody, and hoping to talk to you.
Look at you dropping discounts.
That's what I do.
All right, I want to thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Higher Power Radio. A quick thanks to our team, Brian Colbert, Andrea Bellin, and Ayla Gerard. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. We're listening. We welcome your feedback after all this show is for you. Real quick plug. My book, Healing Career Wounds, is going to be linked here. It comes out on May 20th. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're having any hiring challenges, you need to check it out. You can join the Higher Power Radio community at Higher, H-I-R-E, Power, P-O-W-E-R, Radio, R-A-D-I-O.com, or you can drop me an email at rickardstridesearch.com. Tune in next Tuesday. Our guest is going to be Robert Glazer. He is the founder and CEO of Acceleration Partners. I'm your host, Rick Gerard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power Radio. Catch our LinkedIn Live show every Tuesday at noon, or download the podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate you joining us on Higher Power Radio with your guide to recruitment success, Rick Gerard.